Life is not something you catch, grasp or pursue. It is not a prize waiting at the finish line. Yet, most people live as if fulfillment is always just ahead, always somewhere else. The more you chase life, the more it slips away, and the more your mind becomes entangled in a future that does not exist. The irony is that while you are running after life, life itself is happening quietly in every moment you overlook. Life exists only in the present moment, yet most people spend their entire existence focused on what is ahead. The mind constantly projects itself into the future, imagining possibilities, outcomes and achievements that do not yet exist. In this endless projection, the richness of the now is overlooked. Every thought about what is to come pulls attention away from the reality unfolding in the present, creating a life lived in anticipation rather than experience. When attention is fixated on the future, the present becomes a blur, unnoticed and unappreciated. Small joys, subtle insights and the natural flow of events pass by while the mind chases an imagined destination. Life is not something to be caught at a later time, it is always here in the unfolding of each moment. Missing this means that existence becomes a series of waiting periods, with awareness perpetually deferred to a tomorrow that is never fully real. Chasing life creates tension and restlessness. The constant drive to reach, acquire or accomplish keeps the mind in a state of imbalance. Peace, joy and clarity are replaced by urgency and anxiety. The very act of pursuit creates a barrier between the individual and life itself. As the mind interprets every moment only as a step towards something else, never as complete in its own right. The present moment is not limited or small, it contains the totality of life if one is fully attentive. Awareness of now allows experience to be direct and unmediated by thought, desire or expectation. When attention rests in the present, every sensation, interaction and perception becomes vivid. Life reveals its depth not through chasing or striving, but through presence, where the entirety of existence can be sensed and appreciated without interference. Living fully in the present requires conscious effort to let go of the compulsive need to project, control or acquire. It demands that the mind pause and observe what is happening as it happens. Only then does life stop slipping away and the fullness of each moment becomes accessible. The richness of life is never in the future or in achievements, it exists here, now, waiting to be experienced with awareness and clarity. Desire-driven pursuit is a trap that keeps the mind in constant agitation. When the mind is dominated by wanting, it never settles, never rests. Every achievement is quickly replaced by another desire, every satisfaction fleeting, as if fulfillment is always just out of reach. This constant striving generates a subtle but persistent tension that clouds perception and prevents awareness from fully engaging with the present. The anxiety that arises from desire-driven pursuit is not accidental, it is built into the nature of craving. The mind measures life by what it lacks rather than what is present. Each unmet desire becomes a source of unrest, and even temporary satisfaction carries the shadow of future wanting. This creates a continuous cycle of restlessness where the individual is always reaching for what is not and never able to appreciate what is. A sense of incompleteness dominates life when desire drives action. Nothing feels sufficient because the mind equates fulfillment with acquisition rather than experience. External achievements, material gains or recognition can never satisfy completely because the hunger for more is endless. The deeper the mind pursues, the further life seems to recede, leaving the individual trapped in an illusion of lack. Desire-driven pursuit also disconnects the mind from reality. While attention is focused on imagined futures or ideal outcomes, the richness of the present moment is overlooked. Opportunities for connection, insight and direct experience are missed, replaced by mental projections and imagined scenarios. The mind becomes a prisoner of its own wanting, unable to engage with life as it is. Freedom from this cycle comes from understanding the nature of desire and learning to observe it without being driven by it. When the mind ceases to chase compulsively, tension eases, anxiety diminishes, and a sense of completeness begins to emerge. Life is no longer defined by what is lacking or by the next pursuit, but by the depth, clarity, and awareness that arise when the mind rests in the present without grasping. The mind has been conditioned to see life as a collection of external accomplishments, possessions and experiences to be acquired. From childhood, people are taught to measure worth by what they achieve, what they own, and how they are recognized by others. This conditioning creates the illusion that life exists somewhere outside of oneself, waiting to be captured, earned, or completed. The inner dimension of life, the richness of direct experience and awareness, is ignored because the mind is constantly preoccupied with accumulation. This externalized view of life leads to perpetual chasing. The mind is always looking for the next milestone, the next possession, or the next experience that it believes will bring fulfillment. Happiness becomes conditional, tethered to outcomes that are uncertain and often fleeting. While attention is focused on acquiring what is outside, the depth, subtlety and fullness of the present moment remain unnoticed. Life is happening all around, yet it is missed because the mind is busy pursuing abstractions and projections. The obsession with external achievements also generates restlessness and dissatisfaction. No matter how much is acquired, it is never enough, because the measure of worth is always defined by what lies beyond current attainment. The mind's fixation on external markers creates a constant sense of insufficiency, a feeling that life is always incomplete. This prevents true engagement, as every moment is seen only as a stepping stone towards something else rather than being experienced in its own right. Chasing life externally disconnects a person from their own inner source of awareness and fulfillment. The mind becomes fragmented, oscillating between desire, expectation and fear, leaving little space for clarity, presence or direct experience. Life is perceived as a series of tasks or acquisitions rather than a living reality to be felt. This misalignment creates tension, anxiety, and a subtle emptiness that cannot be filled by external means. Understanding that life is not something to be acquired transforms perception. Fulfillment emerges not from external accumulation, but from awareness, presence and engagement with what is already here. When the mind shifts focus inward, it recognizes that the richness of life is not a reward to be won, but a constant dimension of experience that is accessible at every moment. The external world can be enjoyed, but it is no longer the source of life itself, which has always been present within. Awareness is the foundation of truly experiencing life because it allows the mind to be fully present with what is happening rather than lost in thought or distraction. Without awareness, moments pass unnoticed and experiences are filtered through the lens of expectation, judgment or habit. Life becomes shallow because the depth of each moment is never touched, and the richness of experience is replaced by a mental replay of what should have been or what might come next. When the mind is not aware, it drifts endlessly between memories and projections. Even when physically present, a person may be mentally absent, reacting automatically to circumstances rather than engaging consciously. This lack of observation prevents insight, understanding, and genuine connection with the world and with oneself. Awareness transforms passive existence into active participation, allowing life to be felt directly rather than indirectly through thought and opinion. Attention anchored in the present moment sharpens perception. Sensations, emotions, and subtle nuances of reality that normally go unnoticed become vivid and tangible. Awareness is not passive observation but a dynamic engagement where every action, every interaction, and every sensation is fully alive. In this state, life no longer feels flat or repetitive, it carries intensity, clarity, and a sense of immediacy that is otherwise absent. Without awareness, even accomplishments and pleasures lose their depth. Achievements may be celebrated briefly, but the mind quickly moves on to the next goal or distraction. Moments of beauty, connection, and understanding are missed because the attention is elsewhere. Awareness transforms ordinary experiences into meaningful encounters by allowing one to inhabit them fully, feeling their weight, texture, and resonance rather than brushing past them superficially. Developing awareness requires disciplined attention and the willingness to observe without interference or judgment. The mind must learn to pause, notice, and engage directly with what is happening in the present. When this practice is cultivated, life becomes richer, fuller, and more coherent. Awareness is the doorway through which existence is truly experienced, and without it, all pursuit, achievement, and interaction remain shallow and incomplete. Attachment to outcomes distorts perception and limits the ability to fully experience life as it unfolds. When the mind is fixated on a desired result, every action and observation is filtered through the lens of expectation. Moments are no longer lived for their own sake, they are evaluated, measured, and judged based on whether they bring the anticipated outcome. This creates a barrier between the individual and reality, where life itself becomes secondary to a mental projection of what should be. Expectation creates tension because the present is never enough. The mind constantly compares what is happening with what it wants to happen, generating disappointment, anxiety, or frustration whenever there is a mismatch. Even when something positive occurs, the attachment to outcomes prevents full enjoyment because attention is already moving toward the next goal. Life becomes a series of anticipations rather than a flow of living moments, and the richness of experience is lost in mental calculations and judgments. Attachment to outcomes also diminishes spontaneity and creativity. When actions are guided primarily by results, the mind is constrained by fear of failure, desire for approval, or the need for validation. Opportunities that do not align with expectations may be ignored and risks that could lead to growth are avoided. The present moment, with all its possibilities, is overshadowed by a rigid focus on future rewards, preventing genuine engagement and insight. Freedom from outcome attachment requires a shift in awareness from result to process. When attention rests fully on the unfolding moment rather than the anticipated end, every action becomes deliberate, attentive, and alive. Effort is no longer wasted on controlling circumstances or forcing results, and energy flows naturally into what is present. This allows a deeper, more direct experience of life, where fulfillment arises from participation rather than achievement. Releasing attachment to outcomes transforms perception, action, and experience. Life is no longer a series of pressures, anxieties, and measurements of success, it becomes a dynamic field of awareness, creativity, and engagement. Every moment is accessed fully, every action carries clarity and precision, and the individual begins to experience life not as a pursuit of results, but as a continuous, unfolding reality that is complete in itself. Life cannot be forced or controlled because it is an unfolding reality that exists beyond the grip of the mind. The more one tries to manipulate circumstances, bend situations to personal will or impose rigid expectations, the more resistance arises. The natural flow of life meets this force with friction, and every attempt to dominate or accelerate it only increases tension. confusion, and frustration. Control is an illusion, life responds to presence and awareness, not compulsion. The desire to control stems from fear and a need for certainty. The mind resists unpredictability, seeking to create a predictable narrative where outcomes are guaranteed and obstacles are eliminated. This compulsion, however, distances the individual from the very experience they are trying to master. Instead of living fully, the mind becomes trapped in calculations, strategies and anxieties, preventing spontaneous engagement with what is unfolding naturally. Resistance created by forcing life diminishes the capacity for perception and awareness. When the mind is busy trying to control outcomes, it misses subtle cues, opportunities, and the richness of reality as it is. Life becomes fragmented, with attention divided between what is and what one wants it to be. Energy that could have been invested in conscious participation is wasted on struggle, frustration, and the illusion of mastery. True fulfillment arises when the mind learns to align with the flow rather than impose on it. Surrendering the urge to control does not mean passivity, it means acting with intelligence, presence, and responsiveness rather than compulsion. When action emerges from clarity and attunement to the moment, effort is effective, tension dissolves, and life moves without unnecessary resistance. Letting go of the need to force life transforms existence into a space of harmony and ease. Awareness and presence replace struggle and anxiety, and every moment can be fully engaged. Life becomes an unfolding experience rather than a battle to be won, and fulfillment is found not in domination or control, but in attunement, observation, and conscious participation in the flow that has always been present. The pursuit of life is often a way to avoid facing oneself, a distraction that keeps the mind occupied with external goals rather than inner reality. People chase achievements, possessions, and recognition as if these could fill a void or prove their existence, yet the underlying emptiness remains untouched. This constant activity masks self-reflection, awareness, and the deeper questions about purpose, meaning, and the nature of one's own being. External pursuits provide temporary engagement, but do not address the restlessness that arises from avoiding oneself. Fear of facing oneself manifests in subtle ways, often unnoticed. The mind prefers noise, movement, and engagement with the world rather than stillness and introspection. Confronting one's thoughts, emotions, and unresolved patterns can be uncomfortable or threatening, so the mind seeks refuge in continuous activity. This creates a cycle where the pursuit of life externally becomes a substitute for the courage and attention required to explore the inner landscape. External goals, when used as a distraction, offer only fleeting satisfaction. Achievements, accolades, and acquisitions may temporarily silence discomfort, but the sense of incompleteness soon returns. The mind learns to rely on external validation for self-worth, reinforcing the habit of avoiding self-awareness. The deeper questions: who am I? Why am I here? What is the source of this restlessness? Remain unanswered, and the individual continues to chase without ever arriving at true fulfillment. Facing oneself requires conscious observation and honesty. It means turning attention inward, acknowledging fears, patterns, and limitations without judgment or avoidance. This inner exploration is not comfortable, but it is essential for real understanding and presence. When the mind stops seeking distractions, it begins to recognize its own depth, clarity emerges, and energy is no longer wasted on meaningless pursuits that serve only to hide the self. The more one engages with oneself directly, the less the need arises to chase external validations or goals. Awareness and self-reflection reveal that life is not something to be acquired or achieved, but something to be experienced fully in each moment. The pursuit that once masked fear transforms into conscious action grounded in clarity, authenticity, and understanding. By facing oneself, the individual discovers that fulfillment has never been elsewhere, it has always been within. Silence is not simply the absence of sound, it is the presence of attention, the stillness in which awareness becomes vivid. In silence, the mind is no longer pulled by distractions, desires, or compulsions. Every thought, sensation, and perception can be observed clearly without interference. It is in this quiet space that the subtle movements of life, the rhythm of breath, the flow of energy, the texture of each moment become perceptible and profound. Stillness is the physical and mental alignment that allows life to be experienced fully. When the body is calm and the mind is steady, energy is concentrated rather than scattered. This steadiness enables clarity, focus, and a direct connection with the present. Stillness is not passive, it is an active engagement with the essence of being, a state in which every action emerges naturally from awareness rather than compulsion. Presence is the art of inhabiting the moment completely. It is the conscious experience of life as it is, without projecting the past or anticipating the future. Presence dissolves the illusion of separation between observer and experience, allowing the fullness of life to be felt directly. When one is fully present, every sensation, interaction, and perception carries depth, intensity, and meaning that are otherwise obscured by distraction. Through silence, stillness, and presence, the mind begins to perceive life beyond the superficial layer of events. The subtle patterns, rhythms, and interconnections that underpin existence become visible. Awareness expands and ordinary experiences reveal extraordinary depth. Life is no longer something to chase or control, it becomes an unfolding reality to be observed, engaged with, and understood in its totality. Practicing silence, stillness, and presence cultivates a state where life reveals itself effortlessly. Energy is no longer wasted on chasing or resisting, attention flows naturally to what is. Fulfillment arises not from external accomplishments, but from the direct, unfiltered experience of the present moment. In this way, life is lived fully, richly, and authentically, allowing its inherent fullness to manifest without obstruction or interference. Chasing life externally keeps the mind and attention focused on objects, achievements, and experiences outside of oneself, leaving the inner dimension untouched. While energy is spent on attaining and accomplishing, the deeper layers of awareness remain dormant. The richness of perception, the subtle currents of thought and emotion, and the underlying sense of being are ignored, as if life exists only in the external world. This creates a persistent gap between lived experience and inner awareness, making life feel incomplete despite apparent activity. When the inner dimension is neglected, the mind operates mechanically, reacting to stimuli rather than engaging consciously. Thoughts are driven by habit, desire, or expectation, and emotions fluctuate without insight. The absence of introspection and self-observation prevents the cultivation of clarity, understanding, and stability. External accomplishments may provide temporary satisfaction, but the mind remains restless because the source of true fulfillment lies within, not in external objects or experiences. Dormancy of inner experience limits perception and intelligence. The ability to see, feel, and understand life in its totality is dulled when attention is constantly projected outward. Subtle insights, intuitive awareness, and the capacity to respond with depth are suppressed. The mind becomes scattered, fragmented, and reactive, operating on the surface of life rather than engaging with its core essence. Energy is wasted on pursuits that can never satisfy the deeper dimension of being. Developing the inner dimension requires conscious effort and observation. Turning attention inward even briefly, allows awareness to notice the patterns of thought, emotion, and sensation that are normally overlooked. This introspection strengthens presence, sharpens perception, and creates a direct connection with the core of experience. External life does not need to be abandoned, but it is enriched and harmonized when the inner dimension is awakened and cultivated. When the inner dimension is fully engaged, life is no longer a chase or a series of distractions. The mind becomes calm, clear and perceptive, capable of fully participating in external activity without losing touch with its deeper source. Awareness bridges the gap between internal reality and external experience, allowing every moment to be lived with depth, intelligence and vitality. Life ceases to be missed and its fullness becomes accessible in both the inner and outer realms. The deeper you stop running, the more you realize how much of life has been passing unnoticed. When the mind ceases its compulsive chase for future goals, achievements, or validations, it begins to settle into the present moment. The constant agitation that comes from pursuit gradually diminishes and a quiet clarity emerges. Life is no longer a distant destination to be reached, but a continuous flow that has always been available, waiting for attention and awareness to engage with it fully. Stopping the chase allows the senses to become receptive to subtleties that were previously ignored. The sounds, sights and textures of each moment become vivid, and even ordinary experiences take on a depth that was invisible during constant movement. The mind is no longer preoccupied with what comes next or what is missing, so energy that was scattered in pursuit of external objectives consolidates into presence, focus and clarity. This shift creates a richness of perception that transforms how life is experienced at every level. As the mind rests in stillness, the pressure to perform, achieve or control diminishes. Without the constant need to prove or attain, a sense of ease and freedom arises. The tension that drives compulsive activity relaxes and the individual begins to operate from a place of grounded awareness rather than reactive striving. Life opens up naturally because the mind is no longer creating resistance through attachment to outcomes or fear of incompleteness. The deeper stillness also strengthens insight and understanding. When running ceases, the mind gains the capacity to observe patterns, connections, and subtleties that were previously overlooked. Decisions are made from clarity rather than impulse, and actions emerge effortlessly from intelligence and awareness rather than compulsion. In this state, life no longer feels like a struggle or a pursuit, but a natural unfolding in which every moment carries significance. Releasing the chase allows life to reveal its fullness effortlessly. Richness that was always present becomes accessible, not because anything has changed externally, but because attention has shifted inward and awareness has expanded. The individual experiences life directly, without filters of desire, expectation or projection. Every moment becomes alive, vibrant and complete, demonstrating that fulfillment has never been elsewhere. It has always been here, waiting for the mind to stop running and truly see it.